Hello, Lisa here. Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to Tarot Memoirs. Today we are going to be talking about the tens. So before I jump in, just a quick recap. Tarot Memoirs is the series where I am working through the entire tarot deck. Today represents the last day of the Minor Arcana, which is very exciting. It means we get to dive into quartz next, which is awesome. I had to have a sip of tea because I'm batch filming today, so my throat is like Anyway, Tarot Memoirs is a series on my channel where I go through all 78 cards of the tarot deck. We look at some meanings together with some of my favorite tarot books. This one has been a faithful companion throughout the entire series. I don't know if I'll bring this one into the courts. Jury's still out. And then I share some pictures of decks, or of cards rather, from my collection with everybody. And after that, I dive into some personal associations I have with the cards based on my own experiences. That is the memoir bit. So definitely hang tight, hang out with me, and let's dive in. So I'm going to be starting by diving into the meanings as usual, and I'll be using Kitchen Table Tarot to look at the Rider-Waite-Smith meanings, and I'm using the Centennial Rider-Waite-Smith deck. And then when we dive into the Marseille, I'm going to be using Untold Tarot by Caitlin Matthews. And the Marseille deck, or Pip deck, that I've chosen to work with is the Mythical Creatures Tarot by Baba Studio. So let's first look at the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot. So we're going to start with the Ten of Wands. And what I like about Melissa Sinova's book here, Kitchen Table Tarot, is that before you dive into the individual card meanings, she's got the Minor Arcana grouped by number as well. And she gives a little introduction to each number. Now, leading up to the tens, she also has a section called 9 3/4. Now, if you have this book and you have not read 9 3/4, you need to give it a read. It is fantastic. But essentially what she talks about in the 9 3/4 section is how the nines in the tarot are very much about that sort of, we're nearly there, we're nearly at the end. And then the tens is that moment of just like too much. And so if we could stop the Minor Arcana at like that perfect conclusion, it would probably be at about 9 3/4. And she gives credit to J.K. Rowling for the concept of 9 3/4, but I think that's really fabulous because a lot of times the tens tend to represent a little bit of over energy. It's a little too much often. So what she says about the tens is she calls them excess. The tens are just overdone so much, and she has a lot more to say about that, but that's what stood out to me. And then so the tens, they're a lot more than people need for sure. So let's start with the Ten of Wands. And really, I mean, a lot of us are familiar, but not all of us will be familiar with this image, the Ten of Wands. He's carrying this bundle of sticks. He's not even carrying them particularly well. Oh, in fact, this is what she's gonna say because I highlighted this section. So not only is the person carrying too much, they're carrying it improperly. There's no healthy version of this journey. And I think that's really, really important because what we see in the Ten of Wands is we see somebody who is carrying a lot, they're overburdened, and they're carrying it all awkwardly. They don't have it very well managed. And I think that's the issue. Now there are some Rider-Waite-Smith style decks that show the person in the Ten of Wands having a lot more control and management over what they're carrying, but in our traditional Rider-Waite-Smith imagery, they are struggling a bit. She also says that the man in this card has everything taken care of. He's handling it, no problem, except that he can't see the road before him. He looks so tired and sore. So this is a card where you just keep plodding along. You're doing the best you can, but you're not necessarily pausing to take stock of what you need to do. This is me talking now. You're not necessarily taking stock of it, right? You're just kind of just winging it instead of really pulling back and strategizing. In the reverse, or in the shadow, it's hard to put down these sticks. It's even harder when you've grown comfortable with their weight, which I think is a really, really important point. Sometimes being free of something is just as frightening as carrying it around. For the Nine of Swords, or excuse me, the 10, I keep saying the 9. For the 10 of Swords, this is such a dramatic card. And honestly, for me, I often read this card as drama, because it's just so much. Like, even if you were stabbed in the back, you're not gonna get stabbed usually 10 times. I mean, it's a lot, right? It's probably more than it needs to be. So the best thing that you can say when this card shows up is that at least things won't get any worse, which is often what I say to clients. It's like, you're at a rock bottom kind of position. In fact, she says that. This is literally the bottom. It's excessive, painful, excruciating, and final. Now, sometimes that finality and that excruciating pain is happening mentally and not in reality, right? So I think that's something that's also worth looking at. If you're flat on your face, and this is a really important point, she goes on quite a bit about the 10s actually. If you're flat on your face, you should probably just lie there for a second and catch your breath. It's not going to get any worse, and if your luck has driven you to the ground, you're in no condition to go anywhere. Excellent point. In the shadow or in reverse. Oh, it's still terrible, she says. Just like post-nap terrible. At least you got some rest so you can stand up and learn how to deal with the terrible. I mean, the 10 of Swords is a really difficult card at the best of times, which obviously is, it's not the best of times if you're drawing the 10 of Swords. But I also think it's important to be aware of that drama aspect of that. It's a little bit, are you caught up in victimhood? Are you caught up in the drama? Is it really as bad as it seems? And I think it's good to ask those questions when you pull this card, for me personally. So 10 of Cups is another, it's a lot card, right? Blessings, celebrations, and wishes coming true. It's idyllic. And I think that idyllic thing is worth pointing out because it's so idyllic, it can be unrealistic, right? You can only stare at a rainbow for so long, she says, because what Melissa really advises when she's talking about this card is that, like, yes, you've culminated, you have this great joy, this great happiness, and that's good, but now what? Because that's good, but you've probably still got work to do in other areas. So should you be focusing only on this, or should you also be looking at what's around the bend? Sorry for clearing my throat all the time. My throat's like definitely done today. Inverted. So close to being happy. These are the near misses. So when the 10 of Cups is reversed or in a shadowed aspect, it's often a near miss of that idyllic perfection. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes that near miss is exactly just right, like that 9 3/4 moment. And when we're looking at the 10 of Pentacles, we have the shape of the pentacles does map to the Tree of Life, the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. So this card is about inheritance, financial stability, and charity. There's a lot of family legacy in this card. It's not always money that gets graciously passed on, which I think is a really interesting point. Sometimes our family legacy has a lot more to do with how we treat people and such than money. 10 of Pentacles inverted or in shadow is loss is here, loneliness is here, and financial stress, even devastation, devastation can be in this card in the reverse, because this is very much about you've got it, you've got what you need, you're in abundance, and you've got, you know, you've got enough to pass on, to share, right? Let's take a look at the Marseille and look at Untold Tarot. Caitlin Matthews also has a little introduction section to the number. So for the 10s, Caitlin says, where are we? There we are. 10s denote big things, quantity, accumulation, attainment, and completion, as well as what happens when we have an excess of these. 10s border new possibilities and the end or accomplishment of something. They may show the end of a chapter depending on which cards surround them, as well as the replaying or recapitulation of a major theme in our life. So sometimes it's actually the start. I'm going to bring my camera down just a little. There we go. Sometimes it's the start of something new. It's like the end of something old and then the beginning of something new, or the repeat of something, right? The seasons can also be represented by the 10s in accordance with the Trump's cycle of times. So let's talk about the 10 of Wands. So 10 of Wands, we think about how we bring that number together. You could have 5 and 5, which is double conflict, right? That's where we get that intensity of conflict, that intensity we see in some of the suits, at least if you're looking at this numerologically. So not what she's saying. These are my own numerological things. You can also look at it as an 8, which is double stability, plus a 2, which is a partnership. So a very, very stable partnership could potentially be something that you see in that number. It could also be a partnership that's been stuck in a rut. So there's all kinds of ways to play with numerology along with these cards. But anyway, let's see what she has to say about the 10 of Wands. Success in business or work, a lot of work. Traditionally, a journey across water or overseas, or bodies of water in general, from pools to seas. Spring. Okay, so she's giving us the season. That's good. And the 10 of Swords. Boop. Here we go. Obsessions, suspicions, secrets, conspiracy theories, grief, north, and winter. In the 10 of Cups, your extended multi-generational family, a successful marriage, a house extension, a new generation widens the family circle, a place of entertainment, and summer. And in the coins, financial success or gain, wealth and inheritance, funds you have saved, investments payout, prosperity, ancestral bequest, playing with everything to lose, ancestors and ancestral matters, and autumn. So that is kind of the numerological, or rather the Marseille sort of historical associations for those cards. Let's take a look at some images from my collection. So in the Ten of Wands, we have this Chihuahua-like creature. Look at him sort of balancing on all the sticks, trying to make his way across. It definitely speaks to sort of the tenuous nature of the tens. The Ten of Trees from the Majestic Earth Tarot, accumulation, harvest, responsibilities, and laden. And there is this gorgeous landscape, but in the foreground there is a cart being pulled. The Ten of Wands from the Playful Heart Tarot, trying to push something that's very immovable, trying to manage an unwieldy burden. Oops, there we go. And the Ten of Wands from the Shadowland Tarot, again, kind of unwieldy, managing an unwieldy load. But really, what's funny about this one, what catches my attention is there's a stick with an apple, and it's as if this mouse is carrying all of these branches just to carry this stick home, when really he just needed to pluck the stick and carry just that. So this really speaks to sort of overworking, but to what end? Like, do you actually need to be? Which I think is really clever. Then we have the Ten of Swords. This is so hard in the Wise Dog Tarot. It's so sad. So we have this doggo who is definitely crying. So sad. And we have this owner with another dog. And you get this feeling of sort of being abandoned for the new dog, or perhaps you have this idea of not being chosen at a shelter. It's really heartbreaking, this card. Really difficult. The Ten of Clouds, culmination, drama, conclusion, and dreary for the Majestic Earth Tarot. And we have what looks like maybe a processional to a very foreboding site, maybe for a funeral. And then we have, in the Playful Heart Tarot, this like over-stabbed balloon that's deflated and gone. And it's been stabbed with like a bazillion, well, obviously 10 pins or swords. Overkill, definitely overkill in that card. And then the Ten of Swords, voodoo doll, sort of over pin cushioned here in the Shadowland Tarot. And the Ten of Cups, palette cleanser from the Ten of Swords. Whew, that was tough. Ten of Cups in the Wise Dog Tarot. Very happy scene here. All the bliss. The Ten of Water, appreciation, happiness, contentment, and safety in the Majestic Earth Tarot. So again, we have this gorgeous landscape, but in the foreground, there's this little family like enjoying a picnic. Really beautiful. These cards are so stunning. The Ten of Cups, Playful Heart Tarot, a very happy and joy-filled scene here. And I love this, the Ten of Cups in the Shadowland Tarot. And you get this idea of all this rainbow and pretty colors and paint, but then you look and it's on a beach and all this paint is spilling out on the sand. So it may look pretty and it may look really idyllic, but then you realize there's an impact to all that paint oozing out into the ocean, right? There's that crab down here that's probably not overly excited about all that paint. And then we have the Ten of Pentacles in the Wise Dog Tarot. You get this idea of generations of dogs here. An elder, a middle, and a young. At least that's how I'm looking at it. In the Majestic Earth, we have ancestry, family, dwelling, and enduring. And we have the Ten of Stone. Again, a very large structure here in the background, like a farmhouse, and there's some people in the foreground. Ten of Pentacles in the Playful Heart Tarot. Again, speaks to generational. But I like that it doesn't necessarily show like a specific like nuclear family, so to speak, or whatever you want to call that, like classic. But we still have the pentacles in the Kabbalah shape there. And then the Ten of Pentacles in the Shadowland. And this is really interesting because this speaks to sort of legacy, but the tree is getting smaller and weaker from generation to generation as it goes up into these various sections. And so you can speak to the, excuse me, into the not awesome things that we pass along when we're not careful. So let me dive into some memoir-y bits here. Let me pull up my notes. So let's talk first about the Ten of Wands. So in an everyday way, this is workaholic mode for me, and I think a lot of us can relate. Like, workaholic mode is when we've just taken on too much and now we're struggling. And sometimes we willingly take on too much and then we get cranky at everybody else because we've taken on too much and now we feel overloaded. Not cool, yo. not cool, but I do it. I'm sure a lot of us do it. So that's workaholic mode for me. Memorably, one time that I knew I had totally bitten off more than I could chew was around the time Peggy and I had gotten together. I was in the US, she was in Canada. We were in the process of planning our wedding, planning my immigration to Canada, and there was the third thing. What was the third thing at the time? Oh, finding a place for them to live, because they were going to be moving from Ontario out to Vancouver. I was in the Seattle area, so I could drive up and kind of work out trying to find them places to be, coordinating furniture because they were going to be moving with just their clothing and some small personal items. They weren't going to be obviously bringing any furniture, so we had to coordinate beds and dressers and dining table and all this kind of stuff. And we had a limited budget to do all of the above. So it was a lot. Now, in a kind of a sick workaholic way, kind of enjoyed having all of that on my plate, but in reality, and especially in hindsight, I could have done a much better job of sharing the load. I definitely did bite off a lot more than I needed to, and I handled a lot more on my own than I needed to. Peggy was very willing to help. I was just in control freak mode because I wanted to make sure everything went smoothly for their move, and it gave me something to focus on, particularly when we were managing a long distance relationship. There's a lot of ways I benefited from taking on that much, but also it was a lot, and it was probably a lot, and I was working full time and helping a friend with her wedding. It was a lot. I could have reeled it in just a bit. So yeah, that's what that made me think of. 10 of Swords. Oh, is this tough energy or what? So day to day, when you're at that point where you're just done, you're just mentally, you're done. You're ready to snap. You're cranky, you feel overwhelmed, you feel stressed out. I can have moments like this when I'm already stressed or anxious and then I'm suddenly not getting enough time to process or to think. I can suddenly be in this very like overwhelmed, I'm done kind of place. That's what this makes me think of. When I think of a memorable point when I was really at a mental emotional rock bottom, it was when I went through a period of depression. And this was a situational depression is what I would call it. I don't know if that's a proper term, but I was in a real bad place. And I did go to the doctor. I did get some help. I did get some medication. I did get through it. And I think I was on medication for 3 months. Not a long time. And I was very blessed to be able to work my way through that time. But it was a very, very dark time in my life. I was very broken down. I felt really worthless. I was in a relationship with somebody who didn't seem to care about my feelings, and I clung on to something that I should have never grabbed onto in the first place, but I was very attached, and so I just kept getting hurt again and again, not knowing how to extricate myself from that situation, very 8 of Swords-ish, and then it turned into more and more anxiety in a very 9 of Swords place, and it eventually led me here, where I was just in a really bad place. I didn't know how to have boundaries, I didn't know how to take care of my own needs, like there was a whole lot of contributing factors, but it was not a good time, and I was probably around 21 or 22, maybe around that time, maybe younger, but it was tough. It was very, very tough. And it definitely felt like this could not possibly get any worse kind of situation. Now, in reality, things can almost always get a little bit worse. You know what I mean? But when we pull this, we're at our personal rock bottom in that situation, and things will often improve after this, especially if we give ourselves a little bit of time to process what we're going through. And when you're in a point like this where you feel really hopeless and you feel like things are just too much, there is no shame, none, in reaching out for support and seeking a therapist or a mental health professional or social worker or getting medication if that's what you need to get yourself through that period of time. I have zero shame about the fact that I reached out and said, I'm not okay and I need something to help me get through this. I didn't know if medication was the option, but the doctor gave me some, at the time I had no health insurance, he gave me samples, enough for 3 months, and by the time that had run out, I was able to start getting things back on track for myself, and it was exactly what I needed. And I don't think we talk about that as much. I feel like we're starting to get better about talking about mental health in general. But I think we tend to talk about like sort of an all or nothing kind of situation where you're either well or you're unwell. And I think a lot of us go through periods of in our lives where we're not well for maybe a period of time, and maybe it's just a short-term situation, or maybe we cycle into those situations in our life, and sometimes we may need that support and sometimes we may not. And I think it's just about knowing yourself and knowing your limits and knowing when it's appropriate to, you know, reach out for help. The 10 of Cups, a happy card. It feels like a balm you know, like soothing to come into this card after talking about the Ten of Swords. The Ten of Cups, every day, this is about those moments in our daily lives when we just pause for a second and we're just filled with this sort of like awe and gratitude of like, this is my life. Like this is, I'm so happy right now. Just bursts of pure joy, like bursts of pure happiness. Just those moments when things are just really good. And, but in a big way, my Ten of Cups, to me is, I used to talk about wanting like the white picket fence. Like I very much wanted this scene. I wanted this like perfect like storybook kind of family. And the moment that I kind of realized I had that, it didn't look like this, but I had found it, was pretty magical for me. And it was recognizing that I've attained that. Like I have that, I found that. And just the life that Peggy and I have built together, the relationship we have with the kids, there's always work in anything worthwhile. It's never this easy all of the time. You get moments of it, right? Where it feels really easy and it's just sweet, simple happiness without a lot of other stuff. But most of the time, there's other stuff. There's work to be done. There's personal growth stuff to be done. There's things to work through. There's things we all need to do. And the Ten of Cups, though, is just recognizing that I did find my white picket fence, right? It's just not an actual white picket fence. You know what I mean? So that's what the Ten of Cups rather makes me think of. And finally, the Ten of Pentacles. So what I wrote is that Ten of Pentacles energy is that feeling of almost having too much. In a small everyday way, I could use my deck collection as an example. I have a lot and I'm really grateful to have as many tarot decks as I do. I really enjoy them. They bring me lots of happiness, but there's an admitted level of kind of overkill, right? Now, on one hand, I have enough that I'm able to share or trade or, you know, whatever, like pass things on that don't serve me anymore, whether I gift them or I sell them or I trade them or whatever. There's this, I have an opportunity to do that and to enjoy the diversity of my collection, but I'm willing to say, yeah, absolutely, there's overkill. Nobody needs the amount of tarot and oracle decks that I have in my life. I'm very well aware of that. But they bring me joy, they bring me happiness, they're abundant, right? But there is that level of just, maybe it's just a little too much, you know, that you can cycle into. And so that's a good example in an everyday way of sort of, you've got enough, and which is kind of like the Nine of Pentacles, I feel like, but then you've got just maybe a little bit more than others in this particular category, or more than you need, or whatever. There's a little bit of overkill to this energy, I think. But there is not, there's a good feeling about that if you manage that in a healthy way for you. I hope I said that right. That was really weird for me to try to get through, but I think I made the point. In a big way, I often think of legacy and inheritance when I pull the Ten of Pentacles. And so the memory that I want to talk about is when my mom passed away. She left, there was a small inheritance for each of me and my sisters. And it wasn't like a huge amount of money, but it was huge to me. And it allowed, Peggy and I talked about it, and allowed us to do something we probably would never have been able to do otherwise. And in my case, that was to open a yoga studio. It was something that I thought about, that I wondered if I would ever do. It was just one of those things that kind of like lingers in the back of your mind of like, what if? Had it not been for this inheritance, I probably would have never done it. Now, honestly, a couple years later, that is no more. I don't regret. It was a great experiment. I learned a lot. I found out what I do and don't love about being in that situation. But it made me realize that what sticks with you forever when you inherit something, the legacy you leave, let's put it this way, the legacy you leave, the inheritance you leave to your loved ones isn't going to be the tangible things you leave behind. What's going to stick with them forever is the way you made them feel, and the baggage you may have left them with or not, the way you made them feel whole and worthy, or the way you didn't. That is your legacy. That is what's going to stick with them. You can leave them $100,000 or $1 million or $5 million, but at the end of the day, that's going to run out at some point, or you know what I mean? The thing that's going to stick with them the most, your real legacy, is how you made them feel. And I know that sounds super corny, but to me it's true, because while the inheritance was nice, I'm left with far more to unpack from my relationship with my mother than just that, right? Like, that's what sticks with me. That's what I've had to wade through. That's my stuff to work through that I've been left with. That is part of her legacy to me. And so when we talk about ancestral work or ancestral healing, or we talk about, you know, legacy, I think about the intangible as well as I think about the tangible. So I hope that was helpful. That is my perspective on the 10 of Pentacles. So that brings us to the end of the minor arcana. I showed all my cards. We talked about meanings. We got through it all. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about these cards, what you think about the energies of the 10s and how maybe that's shown up in your life, or any interpretations you might want to share about any of the 10s. That is a wrap for the minor arcana. I'm so excited we're at this place because we get to dive into quartz next, which is great. So I'm going to try to do some planning for that chunk of the series because I think that's going to be really meaty. It's going to be something really good to sink your teeth into, and I'm really excited about that. So watch for that in the future. I am taking a little breather now that I filmed this batch before I do the next, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye!